What's up, everybody? Welcome to the PickSix podcast, CBS Sports Daily NFL podcast. I'm Will Brinson. I'm your host. It is Tuesday, August 3rd, and this is the de facto Carson Wentz emergency foot surgery podcast. Carson Wentz, not relevant enough to actually warrant a emergency podcast, so we're just going to wrap it into today's podcast as we talk with John Breech, who, as you can see, is wearing a Bud Light shirt. That's because today's episode of the PickSix podcast is sponsored and presented by Bud Light. Share a Bud Light with us as you listen along, and you can do so. Go to budlight.com/delivery, and you will get a bunch of options to have delicious, crisp, yummy Bud Light delivered to your house. Again, budlight.com/delivery. Get yourself some beer, drink it with us as you listen to the pod. Breech, what's up, buddy?
Brinson just buried the lead, and you know what the lead should have been today? It's Tom Brady's birthday. Happy birthday, Tom. You're not going to get a Christmas card from the Brady family. You just totally snubbed him. We see what he does in practice when he gets angry. He cusses out his teammates. He's going to cuss at you. But Tom Brady's 44 now. He is older than Wilson. No, he's not. That's a joke.
Wilson's still older, but he is older than both of us.
Thankfully.
That's how that works. You stay this, if you're older than somebody when you're 20, you're older than somebody when you're 44.
That's dumb.
Weird how life works like that. Feels a little empty without Wilson here, right? Would you any words, shaming or otherwise, for Mr. Wilson on his preseason vacation?
Well, since he's not here, I'm assuming he is at the tattoo parlor getting his Ryan Finley tattoo done. That is my words of wisdom. Prediction, shaming, something.
To be Googling Syracuse tattoo parlors, but here we are.
That's what happens.
Did you find out what the name of the tattoo parlor was?
I did.
See if you can get it off of the Oculus Tattoo Lounge.
Carmel. No. If you told me the name, I would remember it. I think it was called Timeless Tattoo. Free shout out to Timeless Tattoo.
Timeless Tattoo. Let's see.
If anyone from Timeless Tattoo is listening, our boy Ryan Wilson lives in your neighborhood. He needs a tattoo.
That is correct. It is Timeless Tattoo because I've clicked that link. It shows up as purple in my Google history. Should with Wilson, how long is Wilson going to be on? Should we call his tattoo parlor right now? See what happens? Should we?
I feel like I know what would happen. I'm not for or against it.
Debo. What I kind of want to call this tattoo parlor and ask what the deal is. Or should we save that for like a Friday mailbag?
Let's do that later this week. We'll build some suspense.
Okay. That's what we're going to do. Wilson won't be listening to this podcast because just trust me, he won't. So we're going to call later this week. We will call the podcast Timeless Tattoo podcast, Timeless Tattoo, tattoo parlor in Syracuse, and find out the details about we'll talk to Kyle there. He's the owner of Timeless Tattoo and Piercing, and I'm looking up a story about him, and we will inquire as to whether or not Wilson is whether or not Breech is able to provide our own artwork or whether he will design one for us, how much said tattoo will cost, and we will get the ball rolling on this so that Wilson does get that tattoo done before the regular season. Because and by the way, we should also probably wait till Friday or later in the week just to confirm that we can call a tattoo parlor from a recorded, like a live recording.
And Wilson's going to have to take another vacation to get his tattoo done. He's out.
Well, I mean, my main concern is that, like North Carolina is a 2-party consent state when it comes to recording. So, I don't feel like going to jail over calling Timeless Tattoo.
We need to talk to the corporate lawyers before. We don't want to get Brinson fired because he's trying to call a tattoo parlor.
That's exactly right, Breech. All right, so let's get to the news of the day. On Monday, the Colts decided to reverse course and announce that Carson Wentz will undergo foot surgery. The surgery is going to take place on Monday afternoon. Took place on Monday afternoon. Excuse me. You're listening on Tuesday. So, in other words, and last week we found out that Carson Wentz was injured. And when that happened, and by the way, for people who want to bet on NFL futures, I didn't get any Colts stuff down because I think I was out on the golf course with my dad when the Carson Wentz news broke. But if you are interested, like if you're betting on the NFL, and we were kind of bearish on the Colts anyway. I would have liked to have gotten some Colts under 9.5 wins. It's probably going to come back up at like 7 or something like that. Depending, it's going to we'll have to wait and see how long Carson Wentz is going to be out. I do have the Titans to win the division. I took that before the Julio trade. I've talked about that at length on this podcast. And in fact, we had a ice cold take presented by Bud Light last week where Carson Wentz, I said Carson Wentz wouldn't be that good. That take. I feel bad now because that take sounds like I'm being a jerk. But when news like that breaks, if you already have you need to be prepared to bet on something like that when news like that breaks, because you can get a great price on certain things. I mentioned I got a great price on the Packers when Aaron Rodgers returned. This Wentz was a real opportunity to jump on Colts unders, Titans to make the playoffs, Colts to miss the playoffs, et cetera, et cetera. But Breech, 5 to 12 weeks for Carson Wentz. What is he, a Time Warner installation guy? 5 to 12 weeks from Frank Reich. That's a pretty wide gap.
That is a humongous gap. I mean, I don't even know that, usually it's 4 to 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. None of this 5 to 12 weeks, because you look at the calendar when he got that surgery Monday, 5 weeks from Monday is before week 1. You don't miss any games. Maybe he's back for practice that week. Maybe they say, you know what, we're going to get him acclimated. You miss week 1, but you're back for the rest of the regular season. If you miss 12 weeks, you are out 7 games, possibly more, because once you're out those 7 games, you get to that 8th game, it's on Halloween against the Titans. But the problem with coming back that week is that the game after that, week 9, is a Thursday nighter. So you're talking about him coming off a foot injury, then have to play 2 games in 5 days. That's not ideal. So this is literally, I would think, the worst case scenario. And I don't think there's any possible way you can throw this clip in my face if it happens. But I don't think there's any possible way he's back in 5 weeks, because what you can't have is him coming back early, re-injuring the foot, aggravating the injury, whatever you want to call it, and then he's out even longer. So you have to play it safe, because this isn't like a pinky injury where you can tape it up. He's going to be on his feet every single play. There's no getting around it. There's nothing, if your left elbow is sore and you're a quarterback and you throw with your right hand, you play through it. But if your foot is messed up, that is a big part of your game, especially someone like Carson Wentz, who loves to run around and make things happen. So this is, I was thinking about betting the Colts to win the AFC Championship, to get to the Super Bowl. And now I'm off the Wentz wagon. I'm a little afraid of the Wentz wagon. It's popped a wheel. This is like 1800s. You don't have what you need to repair that wheel. And I am a little worried about the Colts right now, because I'm not sure who you go out and get.
If you stay on the Wentz wagon at this point, you're just going to die of dysentery.
Yes.
That's an Oregon Trail reference for the youths who won't pick up on that. Jay Glazer pointed out on Twitter after the announcement from Frank Reich. He said, "I know 5 to 12 weeks." Jay Glazer of Fox Sports, of course, for Carson Wentz to return is quite a window, but that's because it fully depends on how fast the foot responds to surgery. They will reevaluate in 2 weeks to get a better gauge. That's kind of interesting to me. So we're talking. Let's see if we record this on Monday. So you're thinking Monday, August 16th is the rough time frame for when we'll know the full time frame for Carson Wentz. In other words, they're going to do the surgery. And I pointed out too, I don't know if I put this out publicly or not. For years, Dr. James Andrews was synonymous with torn ACLs. Or Tommy, like you go see Dr. James Andrews, you're getting a knee injury confirmed. Like you're going to have surgery on your torn ACL if you go to see him. Dr. Robert Anderson, he's the foot version of Dr. James Andrews. If you go see Dr. Robert Anderson for a foot evaluation, something bad has happened, because he's the best foot doctor there is. Used to be the Panthers' old medical doctor as well. What was really surprising.
And not to be mixed up with Robbie Anderson.
The Panthers, right.
Or maybe he is the doctor. What if he's got side job?
Who's Sir Purr? What's that bear doing? I might need to get that. I might need to get that sound clip of Robbie Anderson asking about what's that bear up to? That's Sir Purr. Anyway, the other bizarre thing about the Carson Wentz injury, it was announced by Frank Reich that he's had this foot injury since high school, or like maybe since high school. I said probably since high school, and he had a foot injury, and the bone of the foot just came loose, and it's just bouncing around in his foot. And then they're just going to get rid of the bone. That doesn't sound as cut and dry as they're sort of making it, Breech. Like, what do you mean? You've had this foot injury since high school? Why haven't you fixed it before now? And what do you mean you're just gonna, like, we just got a bone that's bouncing around his foot and we'll figure it out later? Like, what is happening here?
Yeah, I'm not a foot doctor. Is that a podiatrist? Is that what they are? I'm not sure. But
Yeah.
that raised a red flag, because you're literally taking out like 4% of the bones in his foot. There's only 26 bones in your foot, Brinson, and they're taking one out. And also, if this was an injury that was already there and he just kind of aggravated it and the bone came loose or whatever the wording was, like, did his high school not know about it? Did North Dakota State not know about it? Did the Eagles not know about it? Or did all these people know about it? And he just said, I can play through it because it's not bothering me? Or is it something that never bothered him a single time? And then all of a sudden this bone came loose. It's just a really, really weird situation that, an injury you suffered in high school doesn't bother you for 10 years. And then all of a sudden, on the eve of, you're supposed to be a superstar for the Colts this year, they just made a huge trade for you. And now you might be out 12 weeks because your foot is falling apart.
Yeah, and look, the reason that the Colts traded for Carson Wentz, Chris Ballard's talked about this. I believe he's mentioned it on, he's talked about it openly, but I think he specifically said it on Robert May's podcast, the Athletic Football Podcast. But he said, it was Frank Reich's comfort level, his knowledge, his experience working with Carson Wentz in Philadelphia is what got Ballard comfortable with making the trade to bring him over to Indianapolis. Well, you have to ask the question, like, did Frank Reich know about this injury before? It's because if it predates North Dakota State and he worked with him closely, and, you would think that they would have been aware of that, right? Maybe.
Yeah. I don't know what else to say, except, you could have an injury where you eat cupcakes all the time, your cholesterol's building up, and they say, it's a heart attack waiting to happen if you keep eating like that. But you don't know it. You can't feel it until it actually happens. And maybe that was the situation with Carson Wentz and his foot, where he had this. Maybe a doctor told him in high school, hey, look, you can play on this. You're going to be fine until the foot gives out. And he just never thought about it because he was fine. And then the foot gave out. But like you're saying, Frank Reich has coached him before. So if anybody would have known that this injury existed, it's him. Did the Colts training staff know you have to pass a physical to get a trade done? And so, did Carson Wentz tell them, hey, look, I have this foot thing. Maybe you guys should do an x-ray before this trade gets signed off on. So it raises a lot of questions is what it does.
It raises a ton of questions. And again, he suffered he suffered the actual full injury at Colts training camp. So it's, but it's not like it happened and they just missed the injury. But it seems like you're saying it was an injury that was sort of waiting to happen. And if it's, if you're sitting out there, I don't know, that's just something that you think would have been discussed at greater length. So the Sportsline simulations, this is really shocking. Stephen O and company busted out some sims for the Indianapolis Colts. With Wentz healthy, they have them projected 10.2 wins and win the division 49.7% of the time, make the playoffs 73.8% of the time, win the Super Bowl 7% of the time, which is frankly quite shocking. With Wentz out for 6 games, that's just what he's going to go with. They only have him, the projections have him winning 9.8 games. What? That's only a difference of 0.4 games if Wentz misses 6 games, which is a ton. It does have him dropping down to 42.5%. That's a 7% drop to win the division, dropping down to 66%. That's almost an 8% drop to make the playoffs. And this is the craziest one. Only a drop of 1.6% to win the Super Bowl. Basically, the simulations believe that the Colts defense and the Colts run game will help them win enough games that Carson Wentz effectively doesn't matter that much. That's pretty surprising, right? And it's believed that they're going to go with Jacob Eason as the starter. The job is Jacob's right now, Frank Reich said, and he's got to earn it, but he's in the driver's seat.
Yeah, I think if you're Frank Reich, you have to say that because he's the only competent quarterback on your roster right now that can be viewed as a starter. And also, if you go to that press conference and you say, Jacob's not our starter and we are desperate for a quarterback right now, every other team that has a quarterback they can trade you is going to jack up their price by 2 first-round picks. If you're Frank Reich, they're calling and saying, hey, 49ers, do you want to trade Jimmy Garoppolo? And 49ers are like, dude, we just heard your press conference. You said you're desperate for a quarterback. 3 first-round picks. But if you have the starter in hand, that gives you a little bit of leverage in trade talks. So that you're not going to get gouged here. But if they want to go out and get a veteran, it's going to be costly. And the one thing about this, about Stephen O's projection that I think is interesting is, you look at 6 games. If it's a 0.4 difference, that's basically saying the Colts might lose one more game over the first 6 weeks than they would versus Carson Wentz versus having him versus not having him. And man, you look at those, their first 2 games are against the Seahawks and Rams. If they have Carson Wentz, maybe they can win those 2 games. If they have Jacob Eason, I think that's 0-2. I think it totally changes.
And it's 2 home games.
Right. And then they go on the road for 3 straight games, a 3-game road trip against teams that all won 10 or more games last year.
Yeah, it's they have sorry, I scrolled up to preseason. They have Seahawks at home week 1. I mean, you could beat Seattle, I suppose, if your defensive run game is good, but Russell Wilson's going to get his against them at some point. I think, the Colts were slight favorites before, now are actually obviously home dogs. If you can find the game anywhere, so you should bet on Seattle. I think if it's close to a pick 'em or anything remotely there, the Rams will be I would guess 5 to 6 point favorites in Indianapolis with no Carson Wentz. And at Tennessee in week 3 is a huge one for the division. At Miami in week 4 and at Baltimore in week 5. I would expect, we talked about this before in sort of referencing how we thought the Colts could do this season, Breech, but 0-5 feels like a very distinct / likely possibility. 1-4, 2-3. 2-3 would be a win if you get to 2-3 with no Carson Wentz through 5 weeks of the season with that schedule. And let's not sleep on the fact that Deshaun Watson could be back. Probably not going to be playing for the Texans, but it's always possible, I guess. You would think that week 6 win or that week 6 game at home against Houston is a free space. But if you don't have Carson Wentz, I think that changes everything. Sims can be confident on the Colts defense in the run game. Frank Reich can be confident with Jacob Eason all they want, but if you don't have a starting quarterback, it's a bit of a problem.
Yeah, and you look at look at that week 1 game against the Seahawks. The Colts opened up as a 2.5 point favorite. That's kind of where it had been for the last few months. And now this Wentz news comes out on Monday, and now the Seahawks are 2.5 point favorites. That swung by 5 points, and that's just 1 game. And so, like you said, I do feel like without Wentz, if Jacob Eason is your quarterback, it does feel like 2-3 is probably your best case scenario in this first 5 games.
And like 2-3 is an epic victory for them if they get against that schedule.
Well, I think Frank Reich has to be thinking the same way. And if you're thinking, God, 2-3 is our best case scenario with Jacob Eason, we have to bring someone else in. So I think their only option here, if they know that Carson Wentz is going to be missing at least 5 games, is to trade for someone. I think you have to. Well,
there's a lot of names that have been floated out there, and let's discuss some of them. So you have, I guess, the most obvious one is, so there's 3 obvious names. The most obvious one is just sort of messed up, but
hilarious.
In Chicago, Nick Foles. Carson Wentz is hurt. Bring in Nick Foles. That's Frank Reich's boy. He won a Super Bowl with him when he was the offensive coordinator of the Eagles, famously replacing Carson Wentz in the starting lineup for the stretch run of the season, and then in the playoffs when he outdueled Tom Brady in the Super Bowl, and of course the Philly special and all of that.
And then the Eagles built a statue for him, but not for Carson Wentz.
That's right. That Carson Wentz had to walk by every single day when he went into work, knowing that Nick Foles, not Carson Wentz, was the one who secured victory in that Super Bowl. And yet Carson Wentz still has to deal with that ring and have people like Debo brag about how he's a Super Bowl champion, even though, didn't play the Super Bowl. Anywho, the other one that gets bandied about, Gardner Minshew, the would-be competition for Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. And then one more name that I think a lot of people have thought about or discussed is Marcus Mariota of the Las Vegas Raiders. Which are any of those 3 guys float your boat, or do you think a deal just too unlikely to happen?
I think you go another route. I think, number one, the problem with Nick Foles is that Frank Reich was in Philly. He understands the dynamic. He knows that bringing in Nick Foles could ruin the chemistry. Frank Reich has to know it's not a good idea to have Nick Foles take over for Carson Wentz. Because what if Nick Foles starts off 4-2 or 5-1? You can't bench Nick Foles when Carson Wentz gets back, and then all of a sudden you're in that weird situation that you were in with the Eagles from 2018 to where there's not a great dynamic. The quarterback room is a little messed up, and Foles and Wentz can say they're best friends and they like each other all they want. But Wentz is not going to be happy if the Colts trade for Nick Foles. I just don't think Reich would risk the chemistry. Gardner Minshew, look, no one would love to see Gardner Minshew traded more than me, since I'm the guy who predicted he would be traded for a 3rd-round pick. And now I feel like this is the one scenario where that becomes possible, because someone's going to have to overpay for him. You as your quarterback, you need someone right now. You got to overpay. And so that's me saying that he's probably not worth a 3rd-round pick. But in this instance, I think they could get it. But I have a hard time seeing Jacksonville trading to a division rival. Just, you don't want to make your division rival better. And so I think the most interesting name out there is Mitchell Trubisky. I think the Colts need to call the Bills, and maybe if the 49ers are willing to trade Jimmy Garoppolo, because I know Trey Lance has looked really good in training camp the first few days. I don't know if Kyle Shanahan's at the point where he just wants, 5 days ago, last week, Shanahan was saying Jimmy Garoppolo's our week 1 starter. It's Trey Lance probably not going to win the job, but he'll probably see some playing time. I don't know if he's done enough to change Shanahan's mind in a week, but Trey Lance has, by all accounts, been looking good. And if Shanahan's ready to cut bait, then boom, trade Jimmy Garoppolo. So I would say Trubisky would be my number 1 target if I'm the Colts.
All right, I'm gonna throw out that. Here's my ice cold take presented by Bud Light.
Woo.
The Colts trade for Marcus Mariota. I might bet on them to win the division, and that. Here's the other hot take, that Marcus Mariota, who, is great in terms of being mobile. I think he's had time to sort of sit and work on some stuff behind Derek Carr, has looked sharp in Raiders practices, has gotten some tutelage from John Gruden, who, for all his foibles as a GM is certainly, a guy who offensively can coach up a quarterback or two. I think that we see, if Mariota is traded, utilizing play action, utilizing some RPO stuff, utilizing the run game, leaning on that heavily. I think Marcus Mariota could come in and win the division for the Colts, at least get them to the playoffs. And here's the real ice cold take presented by Bud Light. He will be an upgrade over Carson Wentz, a healthy Carson Wentz, and he will play so well that when Carson Wentz returns from foot surgery, he doesn't get his job back. He gets Wentz gets Foles by Mariota if they trade for Marcus Mariota. That is my ice cold take presented by Bud Light, which frankly may be why they don't trade for Marcus Mariota. You can't. You want to win, but if you trade for a guy, you've already given up a bunch of capital in this trade for Carson Wentz. I don't know that they're going to, that's the thing where like Jimmy G might be too expensive for a possible trade here. I think, you know what I mean? Like I don't know that you can give up whatever Jimmy G is going to cost to get it back. And by the way, the other thing too, remember the Eagles were going to get back a first round pick if what happened.
Carson had to play a certain percentage of the snaps.
75% of the snaps. Guess what, Carson? If Carson Wentz is out the first 5 weeks of the season, I think that's off the table, right?
What if this is just all Frank Reich's diabolical plan to make sure the Eagles don't get a first-round pick? But I think you're right about giving up too much, because here's the problem. If you're the Colts, are you trading for somebody who could be your starter the whole season? Or are you trading with knowing that this guy's only going to start 6 games? Because you're not giving up a second or first round pick to get a Jimmy Garoppolo or a Mitchell Trubisky if you know for a fact he's only going to be started for a few games and you plan to hand the reins back over to Carson Wentz. But if you say, you know what, whoever we trade for, if they win games to start the season, he's just our starting quarterback. So that makes it dicey. I like the Mariota because I think with him, it's more harmless. I don't think Carson Wentz is going to be intimidated that Mario is going to take his job. But if Mario goes in there and wins, starts 5-1, then you can't say anything if you're Wentz. You have to think, you know what, I'll just let my foot heal and we'll ride the Mariota train until it crashes. Yeah,
I think Foles, Minshew or Mariota, I think you could get away with, hey guys, you did great work. Thanks for coming along. Unfortunately, Carson is our starter, and they'd be like, "Well, okay." Like I could see that happening. I feel like Foles, if you bring Foles in, I mean, I don't like questioning Carson Wentz's psychological abilities, but I mean, if you bring in Foles, does it shatter his confidence again?
Yes.
You can't do it, right?
No, you cannot.
I think Mitchell Trubisky is a really good example. I think Trubisky or Mariota make the most sense. Minshew, you're giving a potential draft pick to a division rival, and that division rival, who, for as bad as the Jaguars have been, they made the playoffs once since 2008, that 2017 season where they went to the AFC Championship game, lost to the Patriots. Everyone remembers it. If they trade, you have to think that you have a chance in this division if you're the Jaguars and you got Trevor Lawrence, even if your team's bad. And so I can't see Urban Meyer saying, oh, you know what we need to do is try and help the Colts out for the first 5 to 6 weeks of the season. When instead you can say, no, Jacob, he's, go find somebody else. We're not
right.
You mentioned. I don't see that happening.
Yeah. Again, it's hard to see him making interdivision trade. It just, you don't want to help out a rival, especially when they're limping. And when they need help, you don't, they're in the pool, they need a life rat or a life vest. You don't throw to them. They're your division rival. You say, fix it yourself, man. I've been in that pool, in that situation for so long. So I agree with you. I have a hard time seeing, unless the Colts wow them, I have a hard time seeing Urban Meyer pull the trigger on this trade. Yeah,
I think that would be surprising if they did that as well. You know who we could ask about that? Pete Prisco. He's been in Jaguars camp. Let's see. I'll say, Pete, would the Jags trade Minshew in the division? Let's find out. I'll get Pete's answer in like 30 seconds because Pete is the type of person who doesn't mute group text threads, even though there's like 75 million text sent to that thread per day.
Pete will not show up on a podcast, but he will gladly contribute to a podcast by answering any question Brinson asks via text message. You could do the podcast via text with Pete. He should think about that.
He was sending us some Tebow gossip. Doesn't think Tebow's going to make the roster, but he also had something else. But I can't repeat the story because I don't know if it's kosher. And he also mentioned that Meyer does some real college crap, so that should be interesting. Speaking of college, you know what I loved in college? Summertime, no school, classes, to hang out, long weekends at the beach. Oh, summer is here, and that means only one thing. It's time to stock the coolers and start counting down the days until we enjoy a new an ice cold Bud Light in an NFL stadium once again. By our count, only 36 days remain until we can hear a beer vendor hollering about Bud Light, ice cold Bud Light, and help you take summer by the coolers and get ready to tailgate. Bud Light's giving away coolers every day all summer long. That's right, free coolers all summer long. Throw away that dusty old ice box you have in the back of your garage and tailgate in style this fall. All you have to do for a chance to win a sick, bear-proof, keep it ice cold for 9 days, giant Bud Light cooler is sign up and enter on BudLightLegends.com. That's right, BudLightLegends.com. Go there for a chance to win a free cooler. Breech and I each have one. Wilson usually has his on display behind him. I guess I could put mine up. It's actually it's not light. It's a big cooler, but it keeps everything cold. And again, it is bear proof. It says on there bear proof, which is kind of amazing.
It's such a heavy duty cooler that I was thinking about just like putting my money in it, like using it as a safe. That is how heavy and it's bear proof. The bears aren't going to steal my money.
You do want to keep bears away from your money. I actually, it's not the type of cooler you can take on a golf course, right? You can't like put it in the back of a golf cart. Which is actually frowned upon at most golf courses anyway, which is how, on Sunday, I went out, I had my wife drop me off at a golf course on the way back home from my parents' house, which was probably a little aggressive from keeping your spouse happy and keeping your marriage intact perspective. But I met 3 buddies out there and we're like, man, Sunday at 2:00, we're playing golf in the summer. We're cheating life, stealing from life. Like there's only one way to make this better. A couple of cold beers. We go inside. They're like, what do you want? I see a tall, slender, green can. You know what time it is, Breech? Bud Light lime time. Oh, we loaded up the coolers with a bunch of Bud Light limes, several Bud Light limes. And me and my 3 buddies enjoyed the delicious taste of Bud Light lime on the course. Because, like Bud Light, great on the course. But when it's like 90, it's like 95, humid. There's a storm that was like brewing, so the air was really thick, sweating profusely. You need something that kind of not just like is delicious, but also refreshing. And that is what Bud Light Lime did for me on the course on Sunday. In fact, we were down $7, 7 skins. I just played $1 a skin. And me and TJ were getting our butts kicked all day by Josh and Garrett. We just had to press on 18. You know what press is?
I do not. Like double or nothing?
Basically double or nothing. We're like, all right, $7 this hole. I smoke a drive, and I hit my driver pretty good. TJ drives it past me, but then Josh hits a little bit long in the back of the green. Garrett loses his ball, and I stuff a wedge within 5 feet, make birdie. We actually win it. We won $1. It's probably all thanks to the Bud Light Line. What do you think?
I believe it. I just can't. Or you were sandbagging your friends. You pretend like you're horrible for 17 holes. And then the 18th hole, you're like, yeah, you want to go double or nothing or something? And then all of a sudden, Super Brinson with his Bud Light Line comes out and birdies the hole. That's right. It's a pretty good story, Brinson.
I pulled the final Bud Light Lime out of the cooler.
This is why I don't go golfing with Brinson.
Yeah.
Although if there's Bud Light Lime involved and Brinson pays for it, then I might.
Oh, true. That's a very good point. So yeah, go to BudLightLegends.com and get your cooler. You can't put it in a golf cart, but it is bear proof and it does keep ice and beer cold for 9 days. It's absolutely perfect for tailgating because you don't, especially so like at NC State games, you're allowed to leave. You get pass backs. You're allowed to leave at halftime. You get a little pass back so you can come back in after the halftime break. What's better than a cooler that keeps ice cold? Like I can't have a bunch of melted ice and warm Bud Lights when I get back out to my car at halftime to enjoy a ice cold beverage.
And as someone who lives in Nashville, my only college option is for football is to go watch Vanderbilt, and it's Vanderbilt. So literally the only excitement you have is the beer you're drinking.
There you go. All right, BudLightLegends.com. Check it out and win yourself a cooler. Do we need to cover anything else from Carson Wentz? We got everything.
Yeah, I think trade partners, the Eagles are. The Eagles had to know they weren't getting a first round pick, right? When they made the trade, they were like, "He's going to get injured. Something's going to happen. We're not getting a first round pick."
That's entirely possible. The quarterback situation not great in Minnesota either. Jake Browning was the only quarterback available on Saturday when they practiced in the evening because Kellen Mond, Kirk Cousins, and Nate Stanley were all on the COVID-19 list. I believe Mond tested positive, and Cousins, who once, I believe, said, "If I die, I die," when asked about getting COVID, famously said that. He was he's considered a close contact. I'm going to assume if you have the "if I die, I die" philosophy that you are not you're rushing out to get vaccinated, but just a guess there.
Yeah, this is a fascinating situation because look, Mike Zimmer has been, there is no NFL head coach more upset than Mike Zimmer with this whole entire situation. He said, quote, "I am disappointed that this happened. I'm frustrated, not just with my football players who didn't get vaccinated, but I'm frustrated with everybody who hasn't been vaccinated. We'll just do the best we can. It's disappointing." That's what he said over the weekend. And then on Monday, he said, quote, "We could put this thing to bed if we'd all do this, but it is what it is." And he's making these faces like it is. Well, I don't know why these people aren't getting vaccines. And so, again, this is not about making the vaccine political. When we're talking about it with the NFL, it is saying that if your players aren't vaccinated, you're at a competitive disadvantage. And again, this situation is proof of it. Kirk Cousins, it's fine if you have "if I die, I die" is your philosophy. There's no problem with that. But on the football field, if he had been vaccinated, he doesn't have to sit out at all because he was a close contact. Those are the NFL rules this year. And part of Zimmer's frustration was if this had happened the Friday before a game during the regular season, Kirk Cousins is out that game. The Vikings are using Jake Browning as their only quarterback, a practice squad or undrafted free agent, and they're probably going to lose the game because your quarterbacks chose not to get vaccinated, which obviously that's their right to do, and that's fine. But because the NFL has kind of set the rules that if you are not vaccinated, you're at a competitive disadvantage. That's just what it comes down to. And that's why Zimmer's upset. And that is, it is what it is. Like Zimmer said, you can't, there's no way around it. And if Kirk Cousins is involved in a situation like this, or any unvaccinated NFL quarterback is involved, if they're a close contact at any point this season, they're automatically out for 5 days. And so you can say the rule's unfair, but that's what the rule is. And so that's going to make some things interesting this year.
So Cousins, I don't want to get in the game of speculating on whether or not somebody is vaccinated, if we can help it. But as we point out, he said, if I die, I die.
He's not fully vaccinated. It's known because he's out for 5 days. So either he's not vaccinated or he's gotten a shot, but he's not all the way through the process.
Yes. If he is getting vaccinated, he has not gotten his second shot.
Correct.
But his philosophy and his approach would lead you to believe that he's probably not vaccinated. I think this is interesting because, as you point out, Mike Zimmer has said these things. He said it's why people should get vaccinated. Something like this happens a day before the game that has a chance to get you in the playoffs or something like that. This Delta variant is rough. You can see the cases going up every single day now. That's why, for the sake of everybody's health, I think it's important. But some people don't understand, I guess. And Zimmer was talked about Jake Browning. Jake's really smart. He's vaccinated. That helps to be the backup. How about this? I am disappointed this happened. I'm frustrated, not just with my football players who didn't get vaccinated, but I'm frustrated with everybody who didn't. I guess you actually read that one. But the point, disappointed. They're really smart. What's the opposite of really smart? Really dumb. Mike Zimmer wasn't a huge Kirk Cousins fan when they signed him. I don't think he's ever really been a huge Kirk Cousins fan. I think he dislikes the fact that there's all this money tied up into his quarterback who is fine, but not like an elite option. I think he's far more concerned with Dalvin Cook. I think he's far more concerned with his defense. And the fact that Kirk Cousins would not be vaccinated and could potentially cause the Vikings to miss the playoffs as a result of missing games, not because he got COVID, because of the way the NFL protocols work, he was in close contact with somebody. I sort of wonder if this isn't a kind of a point of contention between Zimmer and his quarterback, and if it might be something that could sort of, stew over the next few weeks and into the regular season, depending on whether or not Kirk Cousins ends up getting vaccinated.
Oh, well, I would, again, and I think last week we brought up Ryan Tannehill, Titans quarterback. He said, I didn't want to get vaccinated. I wasn't planning to get vaccinated, but these NFL rules are so ridiculously, the competitive disadvantage is too great. So I had to get vaccinated because these NFL rules are too crazy. And so that's him saying, look, I don't want to, but I also am not going to hurt my team. I'm not going to let these guys down. And, I'm not going to miss games. So I'm going to go out and do it. And I think that's the kind of attitude Mike Zimmer wants to see. Look, I understand if you don't want to do it, but look, you're going to help the team, because you can't magically miss a game in the middle of the season because you had a close contact with someone at the grocery store, and that's kind of the situation that a team can be in if their quarterback is not vaccinated. So it's dicey. And I think you're right. I think Zimmer, I could see a situation where Zimmer and Kirk Cousins sit down and Zimmer says, look what just happened to us. What if that happens in the regular season? Cousins is going to plead his case, say why doesn't think he needs it. And Zimmer will say, well, this is why you do. You could miss games. And that is where things could get ugly.
I mean, again, it's really not a political discussion or it's not even really a vaccination discussion. It's a competitive disadvantage discussion as it relates to NFL to like, if you lose Kirk Cousins for 2 games, I mean, that if you told me right now you're getting 15 games max, and it's not just one time. Because of the way it works, like you say he could go to the grocery store week 2, get a close contact, and miss 5-10 days. He could go to the week 15. I mean, it could happen repeatedly.
Yeah, and that again, that's why Mike Zimmer's so upset here. And I think you can almost tell, like John Harbaugh. I wonder how he feels because Lamar Jackson also out, and he's out in an amount of time that indicates that he is either not fully vaccinated or not vaccinated at all, and so. That you're an NFL coach, you have so many things to plan for, a million things to plan for. And now you have to worry about that your starting quarterback might not be available in any given week. And so that just adds, a bigger headache to your plate. So I think Mike Zimmer is probably just going to sit down and say, look, man, we need you every game and this is how you can do it.
Yep. This will not be the last that we hear about this. I am sure it is probably going to affect multiple NFL teams as we get closer to the season. Nick Chubb signed a 3-year extension with the Browns, got $36.6 million over those 3 years with $20 million guaranteed. I think Nick Chubb is criminally underrated. I think there's a decent chance you could suggest that Nick Chubb is the best running back in all of professional football. I understand that people would push back against that. When you watch him run, though, to me, he looks like a guy that is worthy of that title. Dalvin Cook, when healthy, could be up there. Christian McCaffrey, of course, Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara, lots of guys that could challenge him for the title. I just think Nick Chubb, especially as a pure runner, is just one of the best, is maybe the best running back in football. And look, good for him. He got his money. Good for the Browns. They paid a guy who's a critical component to their offense. I think this is kind of a win-win because you get the deal done now, and no holdout. You're not trying to force some massive extension through. Agree or disagree, Breech?
I disagree, and I agree. I agree, and I think
F you, Breech.
I think the Browns need to send a thank you note to the Titans because they kind of created this ceiling for what running backs are going to be paid now. Obviously we saw Christian McCaffrey get that huge deal. I think was $16 million per year. Zeke got that huge deal that I think the Cowboys have been regretting since the day they gave it to him. Alvin Kamara got a big one. But when you look at ever since the whole you can't pay running backs philosophy has come out, Derrick Henry is the poster child because he 2,000-yard rusher last year, and he's been putting up huge numbers his whole career. And then the Titans signed him to a deal that was worth $12.5 million a year. So anytime you're negotiating with a running back now, you say, look, Derrick Henry's making $12.5 million per year. You want more than that? That's ridiculous because he's been the best in the NFL. And so, how can you ask for more than that with a straight face?
It's like, do you think you're better than Derrick Henry?
Yeah, exactly. You give us a 2,000-yard season, then we'll talk about paying you more than Derrick Henry. And so I agree with you. Chubb might be better than Derrick Henry. It's close. But the bottom line is that, it would have been hard for Chubb's camp to ask for more than what Derrick Henry's being paid. And so I think this was the best for both sides. He got close to Derrick Henry money. I think it was $12.2 million per year in new money. And Derrick Henry's average contract is now 12.5. So it's really close. And, you're a running back. You don't know how much money you're going to get paid. So you got to get paid when you can. You get your $20 million guaranteed here up front. So I actually like this deal for both sides.
All right. One more piece of news and we'll get out of here. You can always tell when Debo's massaging the rundown to try and prevent us from talking about, talking bad about the Eagles. But DeVonta Smith, Eagles first round pick, is going to miss 2 to 3 weeks of training camp with a sprained MCL. I think I saw Ian Rappaport send this out, rap sheet from NFL Media, and was like, no, it included no cause for concern in the tweet. Excuse me? If your first round pick has an MCL sprain, Debo, would you say there's no cause for concern here, or would you say there is some cause for concern?
I would say some, especially when you weigh 158 pounds.
Yeah. This is clearly coming from a team. Somebody on the team is like, look, you can have this, but you need a report. We're not worried about it. It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, that's crazy. This is like driving on the interstate and you have a flat tire and I have 3 other tires. The car is still moving. No cause for concern. We're good. Like this is a rookie who's got a new quarterback in Jalen Hurts. So what do you need? You want these two guys to build up some chemistry, and that's what they're going to do in training camp. Now he's going to be out 2 to 3 weeks. So now you're looking at the August 24th, August 25th, when he's maybe back on the field. You don't even know with an MCL sprain. And so at that point, you have barely 2 weeks before the season, but the hard part of training camp's over where you're out there just practicing all the time. By the time you get to like August 25th, when he'll be back, you're almost thinking that, you're game planning for that week 1 game. And so I'd be a little bit concerned if I'm the Eagles.
I would be extremely concerned if I'm the Eagles. I tweeted that out and people were like, I mean, you've got, look, I know that none of the, I mentioned, so here's the thing. The Eagles, as we pointed out many times on this podcast, drafted J.J. Arcega-Whiteside over DK Metcalf. They drafted Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson when, both of those picks were sort of the consensus, hey, there's a top guy available, and they went in a different direction. And I realized that DeVonta Smith doesn't have anything to do with that, but they traded up to snipe the Giants and get DeVonta Smith. They need DeVonta Smith to be good this year. He needs to be an impact first-round receiver for the fan base to quit thinking about the other guys. And if he sprains his MCL, you're talking about a speedster, so it's not like it's not like he's going to lumber around and just move the chains with a bum knee. And then B, he's a rookie wide receiver in training camp. These are valuable reps, and he was, by all accounts, dominating until this injury. To me, there's massive cause for concern here. But okay.
And Buccaneers fans are like, hey, bro, our 43-year-old quarterback played an entire season with a torn MCL. You can't even practice with a straight MCL. Get out of here. Practice.
All right. That's it. That's all the news. Debo, some concern, apparently, over his rookie first-round pick having a sprained MCL. Sprained is just a nice way of saying torn, by the way. For Breech, I'm Brinson.
Dr. Brinson.
That's Dr. Brinson for you. That's Dr. Brinson to you. All right. We will talk to you guys tomorrow. See ya.